what is age verification? I guess it's fairly obvious from the title. Age verification is the process or the mechanism by which the provider of a product or a service confirms the age of the person seeking to buy, access, consume, look at the product or service in question. And it can be required by law in respect of certain kinds of products or services, or it may simply be a choice that the provider of the product or service adopts and imposes on their website or in their bar or restaurant or club or whatever it might be. And in almost every country in the world, people will be familiar with age verification, in the physical world. Most jurisdictions have got restrictions on products like alcohol and tobacco, cannot, generally speaking, be sold to anybody under the age of 18. Some places don't allow people below a certain age to enter certain spaces, bars, clubs being the obvious ones. Certain types of films can't be viewed by people under a certain age in public cinemas, although generally speaking, there's no legal prohibition on them watching them privately at home or whatever. And generally, these age verification laws or policies are enforced simply by somebody standing at the door or behind the counter. They look at the person, and if they believe they might not meet the age limit that's been specified, they'll ask them to provide documentary evidence to the contrary. And absent that documentary evidence, they'll be turned away, or they ought to be turned away. And I know, I'm certainly in parts of America, not that long ago, when I was in bars, I had to produce my passport to convince people that I was over the age of 21. Not a difficult task, you might think, you just look at my face. But I still had to produce documentary evidence because the guy behind the bar said that should the police or whoever come and raid the joint, they wouldn't accept simply a visual appraisal. Whereas in the UK, that normally would be acceptable. So when doing age verification in the physical world, issues arise, for example, in respect of CCTV images or copies that might be made of documents showing a person's identity. But in the virtual world, and I'm conscious, by the way, of there's a great deal of pornography surrounding children that's not online, in advertisements, in films, in TV programs, and so on. And that's not an area that I'm going to speak about. My whole kind of work over the last few years has been in relation to pornography that's on the internet, which of course is where children and young people now do spend a huge amount of time. So it's not that the internet's the only place that we need to be concerned about, but it's the only place that I'm, as it were, going to be speaking about in this short presentation. And privacy is quite rightly a major issue for lots and lots of people when it comes to the online space. And not all of these people are evil, people who don't care about the question of porn. There are genuine civil rights issues and concerns that do arise when any online business starts collecting data about you as a person. And I don't know of a single country in the world where the question of accessing pornography is not considered to be a sensitive matter, even in countries that have got, as it were, very liberal reputations of being very, very liberal. Still, the question of whether or who accesses pornography on the internet or indeed anywhere is considered to be a sensitive matter, which is why the question of privacy also arises. And there is no point, I can tell you from heart, I've got the scars, there is no point trying to dismiss the issue of privacy when we're dealing about pornography and children's access to it, because you will lose the argument if you try to go down that route. But here's the good news. There are now no technical barriers to doing online age verification in ways which fully respect the right to privacy of the individual wanting to access a pornographic website or an online service which provides access to pornography or other sexual services. Even in jurisdictions which may, excuse me, my screen's just gone a bit wobbly. even in jurisdictions which may have limited state-issued identity documents or poor access. And this arises, by the way, particularly in a great many countries in the global south. There may not be ready access to official documents that the state has issued confirming your age and identity. But even in those countries, it's now possible, with the way the technology exists, to get a very high degree of accuracy about who an individual person might be by using a webcam or the camera that's built into a telephone. And some of the a very impressively high level of accuracy. So within sort of 12 months, 18 months, that kind of age range, or even narrower now. And some of these solutions also incorporate what we call a liveness test to minimize the risk of anyone using a parent's or an older person's ID or photograph. So you have to actually be physically present at the time that you open your account on the porn site, or try to open up an account on the porn site, and the systems themselves can see whether or not this is a live human being that's actually present and asking for the account to be opened in their name. And it's relatively easy now to do this for people where 18 is the age limit that you're trying to establish. And 18 is almost always the age limit when it comes to the access of pornography. But even if you had a lower age limit, even if 18 wasn't your goal, or limiting access to people under the age of 18 wasn't your goal, age estimation solutions, which are it's a slightly nuanced way of describing age verification, age estimation solutions are becoming increasingly sophisticated and accurate. So, I mean, we could discuss the technical aspects of how it's done and so on, how the data is processed, where, if at all, it's stored, but that would be incredibly tedious. It's well written up and well documented, and if you do want to know anything more about the technical details of how it's actually done, I'm happy to reply to any emails or messages that you might send me. But for these purposes, simply take it from me. There are no technical objections anymore to how one might perform age verification and how one might verify that the person applying for the account is within at least a given age range. So how did it all begin with age verification, and what's happening now? Well, as you just heard, the UK was the first country in the world to introduce any kind of age verification requirement for any kind of product or service that was provided over the internet. Now, the truth is, and I work with children's organisations here in the UK, and the truth is, if we'd had a choice in the matter, we would have gone first for age verification in relation to pornography sites, because without question, for us as children's organisations, that was in these early days of the internet, year 2000, 2001, and so on. That was a major and growing concern that we had, and that parents had, and children themselves had. It's not just boring old adults, in inverted commas, that find pornography on the internet troublesome. We've done several surveys in which children themselves have said the kind of images that they've been exposed to on the internet, the pornographic images that they've been exposed to, were incredibly upsetting for them. It came out as the #1 issue in a survey that was carried out, I think, in 14 different countries in Europe, including the UK. Pornography came out #1 as the issue that children themselves found most upsetting. But nevertheless, going back to my story, so we would have gone for pornography first, but what happened was in 2003, Tony Blair's government announced a review of gambling policy. So we'd had as children's organisations, we'd had a number of parents coming to see us to tell us that their children, typically boys aged around 14 or 15, had been diagnosed as gambling addicts. That's to say, they got online accounts with access to a piece of plastic, a debit card, not a credit card. They got access to an online bank account with a debit card. They've been using these debit cards to open up accounts with online bookies, and blowing all their pocket money on a horse or a football match or something of that kind, and then going off and stealing money from their parents, stealing money from their friends, or stealing things which they could convert for cash to put the money back into their bank accounts so that they could carry on with their gambling addiction. Just like drug addicts are well known to do. We went to see the banks and pointed this out to them. They said, yes, we're very well aware of this problem. We take it very seriously, but the truth is they did nothing to try and detect and prevent young people from using their gambling websites and blowing their pocket money on a horse or a football match or whatever it might be. They did nothing until Parliament passed a law, which they did in 2005, saying that in future, if you want to have a license to run a gambling website within the United Kingdom, you have to get it from the Gambling Commission, and the Gambling Commission will only give you that license if you can show that you've got a robust age verification process in place. Since that law became operative on the 1st of September 2007, we've not heard of a single case. There may have been some, but I haven't heard of them, where a child has gone to a gambling website, ticked a box to say that they were 18, and gone on then to place a bet. It simply cannot happen now. I mean, we were helped by the fact that the money laundering rules also had similar requirements to those which came in the Gambling Act, but nevertheless, we showed it could be done. And as I say, we've heard of no cases since then of the act of children being able to break that rule. So, of course, as soon as we'd established the precedent that we could do it for gambling sites, we went back and then started agitating for it to be applied to pornography sites. And we were able to say, well, look, it's working in the field of gambling. There's no reason, therefore, why it can't work in the field of pornography. It took us about 15, 16 years in the end to get the new law in place. We had a false start in 2019. Parliament actually passed a law in 2019 making age verification for porn sites a legal requirement. But then Boris Johnson became our Prime Minister, and he simply said he would refuse to implement the law. Very, very unusual for any government to do that. It's not entirely without precedent, but he basically said, I don't care what Parliament has already agreed. I am not going to be the Prime Minister that gets between the working man and his nightly porn fix. That's more or less exactly what he said. I wasn't in the room when he said it, but I've spoken to at least 3 people who were in the room when he said it. He didn't want to be the Prime Minister to get in between a working man and his access to porn. And it was his only obsession at that time was Brexit, and he wanted to get a general election, win a majority so that he could get Britain out of the European Union. And he thought if he allowed this new porn law to kick in and take effect, it could jeopardize support for his party, and that could risk losing the election and therefore losing Brexit. Britain isn't now. We now have an age verification law in place. It finally takes legal effect on the 1st of January, so next month, for certain types of porn sites, and for the other types of porn sites, it will kick in April. We wanted the new law to apply to all porn sites, but that's not in the end how the law was framed. But there's only a few months separation from them, so we're not delighted, but we're going to settle for that. The issue will be how effectively and how efficiently the regulator, which is responsible for implementing this law, Ofcom, pursues the porn companies. Our intention is to make sure, we're going to be on their case from day one, making sure that they are effectively policing this new anti-porn law, or this new age verification law, rather, for porn sites. But outside of the United Kingdom, the European Union has a thing called the Audiovisual Media Directive and the Digital Services Act, both of which require companies to take steps to protect children from age-inappropriate content. And it's quite clear that age-inappropriate content pornography is considered to be a category of age-inappropriate content. And they are developing online ID systems which could be used for age verification purposes. And it would be, obviously, it would be fantastic if and when the European Union adopts an explicit law, so to speak, in relation to pornography websites and children, because the market, the size of the European market is enormous, and so no company, no business of any kind will want to be on the wrong side of the European Union's laws, because the market itself is so valuable. Germany has had an age verification requirement in respect of pornography sites for probably longer than anywhere else in Germany, and they've already authorized or given official approval to over 100 different methods for carrying out the age verification requirements. Cyprus, which is within the European Union, was not very efficiently giving effect to the Audiovisual Media Directive. It was taking a very relaxed view about what it considered to be porn. And so German companies and German, I saw that question. Yeah, I think I can send you the list of the 100 different methods that the Germans have approved. And so the German media authority has taken legal action against the Cypriot government, or the Cypriot media authority, to try to get the Cypriots to have a stricter interpretation of what the European porn law actually says. France has a new age verification law, specifically, in fact, I think pretty much exclusively in relation to pornography sites, but there is some doubt. It's only very recently come into effect or come into force, and there is some doubt about its effectiveness because the French privacy regulator has raised objections to it, and the body Arcam, I think, if I remember correctly, Arcam, the body that's meant to be supervising the age verification law in respect to pornography and media, only pursued the very big porn sites, and it left the smaller porn sites on one side. And what we then saw was a very large drop in the number of users going to the big porn sites, because they were having to implement age verification, and the traffic all shifted to the smaller pornography sites. So what we learned from that is, and it's fairly obvious when you think about it, if you're going to have an age verification law in respect of pornography sites, it has to apply to porn sites of all sizes, and whatever kind of system of penalties or enforcement you devise to put behind the porn laws, they have to be vigorously applied by the regulator. Otherwise, all we will see is the traffic shifting between sites, and we will not achieve what we want to achieve, which is keeping porn away from children's eyes. Spain, for the same reasons as the French, the Spanish government have been particularly energetic in developing solutions to keep pornography sites away from children's eyes. They're developing a specific solution that apparently will work well in Spain. We're not sure if it will work, how well it will work outside. And the Italians also, the Italian regulator is also developing a solution specifically for Italy. By the way, just going back to the point I made earlier, if the European Union itself can come up with a method of doing this and make it a regulation which applies in every member state, all 27 countries, that will obviously be a much better outcome than having different solutions being operated within different jurisdictions. Elsewhere, Poland. I think that was maybe Poland was the first time we met, actually. But Poland has been talking about doing age verification for pornography sites for about 5 or 6 years, perhaps even longer. But it's not actually materialized yet. But I'm told, I talk to the people in Poland quite regularly. I'm told that they They do think it will happen in Poland soon. Again, going back to my earlier point, if the European Union, however, were to make it a law or a regulation for the whole of the European Union, then the question of what the current Polish government thinks about it would become much less important, because they would have to do it as a member state of the European Union. Canada, I hadn't checked in the last week or so, but the last time I checked, which was a few weeks ago, there was a measure being debated within the Canadian Parliament, which would effectively copy the British system for ensuring that age verification was in place to stop kids from getting access to porn sites. In America, I probably don't need to tell you anything about what's happening in the USA. I spoke directly to legislators in Utah and Louisiana about what their plans were for introducing age verification restrictions on porn sites to keep kids out. As I understand it, every piece of legislation that's emerged at state level is being challenged by the Electronic Frontier Foundation and similar sort of civil rights bodies. So we'll just have to, and civil rights and privacy organization. So we're just going to have to wait and see what the effect of that is. Obviously, in the case of the individual states, or my reading of the situation of it was, in any event, the only reason the individual states were taking action was because of the complete paralysis in Congress, not ever being able to agree on anything. And God knows, you certainly know better than I do what the prospects of any progressive change will be with the new Congress that was recently elected. In almost every liberal democracy that I can think of, the question of how to protect children from exposure to pornography on the internet is being discussed within and around policy-making circles now. Because universally, it's recognized, even again in the countries which have very liberal attitudes towards it, or at least are thought to have very liberal attitudes towards it, even within those countries, nobody argues, or very, very few people argue, that exposure to pornography does children any good. They all accept that it's harmful, think something should be done about it. The issue is, as ever, is what exactly to do about it. Of course, there are many jurisdictions where publishing pornography is illegal and has been for a very long time. I remember many years ago when I was working a lot with the United Nations, I had to have discussions with the Iranian government, and the issue there was quite a different one in one sense. The Iranian government at that time would not recognize child pornography, as they then called it, as being a distinct or different category from adult pornography. It was all pornography, and therefore, as far as they were concerned, they wouldn't consider any extra penalties or any different penalties in respect of child pornography, because they said it was all illegal. Now, we knew whether it was illegal or not, it was being accessed within Iran. And that's why we went to speak to the Iranian government to see if they could at least acknowledge it. But they said simply, they really didn't want to acknowledge it because, as I said, as far as they were concerned, all pornography was equally bad and illegal and shouldn't exist. So there was no need for age verification or any other measures to keep people away from it.